one last reminder, Pittsburgh, our city's biggest celebration of biking is coming up soon. The UPMC Health Plan Pedal Pittsburgh is on Sunday, August 25th, and thousands of cyclists of all ages and fitness levels are going to be touring our city together, all to support Bike Pittsburgh's mission of making our home safer for biking and walking. You can also party it up after the ride at the Finish Line Festival in Allegheny Commons Park. Join the ride. Register now at pedalpgh.org. Do you like the art of mystery? Are you into illusions? Then you definitely want to check out the latest show at Liberty Magic. It's called Meant to Be, and it's the brainchild of Hennick. He's a musician and entertainer who's performed all over the world, and he's got this really cool specialty. He offers personalized mysteries. The show runs through September 1st, and if you want to make sure you are up close to the action, definitely consider upgrading to the VIP experience. You get reserved seats in the front 2 rows, and there's a special meet and greet after the show. Get your tickets at trustarts.org/magic before they disappear. Today on City Cast Pittsburgh, the Strip District is growing. Downtown is celebrating a new milestone, and there could be big changes coming to Pittsburgh area schools. We remain in awe of how much trash is in our rivers, and we're learning about a new-to-us architect whose Steel City homes have hit the market for enormous price tags. Plus, a little preview about what to look for from CityCast next week. It's August 16th, the Friday News Roundup. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. This week, I'm with CityCast contributor Meg St-Esprit and my girl Mallory Falk. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Good morning.
Meg, we figured we would get things started this week with a whale of a tale. Did you see how much river junk got pulled out of the rivers this week? The Allegheny, the Mon, and I think they're working on the Ohio too.
I did. You know, we're a one-car family for a couple of weeks, so I've been taking my husband to work on the south side, and I stood from his office parking garage and thought, what are they doing? I assume they're looking for a body. But yeah,
oh, gosh.
I know. Well, I mean, it happens, right? But right. Yeah, they're cleaning, they're dredging stuff out, and they have found a lot of junk.
Yeah, I think it's 100,000 pounds and counting, but they're still working on it.
It's really validated my take on not swimming in these rivers, now knowing what exactly is lurking below.
I swim in the rivers. I'm going after this to swim in the river. Maybe at least now I won't catch my foot on something, maybe.
But you also are swimming pretty far upriver from Pittsburgh City proper, right? Did I make that up?
Downriver, yeah. We go down.
Downriver. I forget
Beaver
which
County.
way is up and down. Yeah.
We go down to Beaver County. Yeah.
It's mostly car parts and like chassis. There's some bicycles, skateboards, even a mattress, apparently. Meg, you actually saw it in person. I've only seen videos, but it's like this little thing that's like floating on the river, like sort of a small barge. And then it like goes down and plucks like with one of those like arcade game claw hands.
Yeah, and it's funny because I thought, wow, if my kids were still toddlers, like they would watch this all day. But it was a pretty unique piece of equipment. It was interesting.
Yeah, I just want to shout out Trib reporter Justin Vellucci, who has clearly been having himself a good time reporting on this. So far, not one, but 2 stories. There are multiple subheadings throughout the story. He really paints a picture of this whole situation. We'll link it in our show notes. But like even down to like the smells, pungent, even acrid, vaguely salty, like the ocean, but rotten and sour. Justin, please keep doing this. I love it.
It's beautiful.
This is the most poetic way our rivers have ever been described.
I know. So this whole thing has been an effort between the Three Rivers Waterkeeper and Living Lands and Water. Sounds like it's also mostly privately funded, maybe entirely. I'm just in awe of this whole operation, and I hope they keep doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My son was telling me how much the rivers have changed, like how shallow it used to be. And then we dredged it out for, barges and industry. And then I guess we filled it in with crap again. So maybe it's good that we're, righting that wrong.
Is it just going to be a semi-annual tradition?
Honestly, I feel like it should be.
The dredging of the river. Yeah.
Well, let's keep our conversation Riverside. A couple Pittsburgh neighborhoods are seeing a lot more visitors. A pair of reports recently came out about both downtown and the Strip District, totally separate in how they came out, but still really interesting findings.
Yeah, so the Strip District saw 7.49 million visitors last year, 2023. And then downtown got over 1.76 million visitors just in July. Mm-hmm. Although, there's a big downtown event in July. We'll get into that in a second.
I was going to say downtown felt really hopping all of July. And, I write about travel nationally. That's one of the beats I cover. And my editors, they're loving Pittsburgh. I've done stories on the city for Good Housekeeping and Thrillist. I did one last year on the Thunderbolt being a rite of passage, and it did really well. Like people...
Oh, like the Kennywood roller coaster?
Yeah, like once you're tall enough, that's like a big step for a kid here, and it has been for a long time. And so I think people are talking about Pittsburgh, like they want to come here.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a transition over, this is probably over the last 20 years, but, when I used to tell people I was from Pittsburgh, I would kind of get blank stares or a random question about cheesesteaks that I told them I couldn't answer. And now it really feels like a city that's on people's radars or that that's on their list. So I've definitely noticed that change over time. But yeah, I saw that the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership says that we are back to pre-pandemic visitor traffic in July. But like I hinted at, that is entirely due to Picklesburgh. It has been shocking to me how many people travel from around the country, maybe around the globe for this event celebrating pickles. But clearly it has a draw.
Yeah, I saw it was 250,000 people between, I guess, July 18th and July 21st. So that is the weekend, which is 27% more than last year, which was also a record.
Wow.
Granted, Picklesburgh was longer this year. I don't know if that made a difference, but good on them. They're give them an extra day and get that many more people into downtown and introduce them to Pittsburgh.
Just anecdotally, my cousin was visiting during Picklesburgh, and we went to go ride the incline, which she had never done before. And the line was so long that we turned away. It looked like it was going to be a multi-hour wait, which is something I have never experienced, but really illustrated to me how many people specifically came to Pittsburgh for this event. I think also there were a lot of Philadelphians who were here for the Phillies-Pirates series of games. But yeah, I had never seen a line so long that people actually turned away because the wait wasn't worth it.
Yeah, and we didn't go to Picklesburgh this year. Sometimes it's a little tricky to navigate with a lot of little kids, but...
The lines are also just so long, and the pickle offerings are mostly hot. It's always a hot weekend in July. I want everyone else to go, but as a local, I don't feel the need.
Well, and my kids, they only pretty much like the standard, Heinz basic dill pickle, so,
They're homers. They're classic. I love it.
Yeah, we skipped the crowds, but it was just so nice to see the city so vibrant. We were downtown for other things, and I think the location change has been really good. Picklesburgh can be bigger now. So I'm excited for it. It's a cool thing to be on the map for. Pickles, I love it.
Yeah. And I feel like we keep hearing about office vacancies, for example. So many of our big downtown skyscrapers have been getting their tax bills adjusted, lowered because of it. But the PDP says daily foot traffic increased 100,000 people or a little over just last month.
Wow.
So that includes visitors, employees, and residents. And that would be the highest that it's been since before the pandemic, which I think bodes well. Of course, we still need to see those residency rates in those buildings go back up. If we want to feel a truly healthy community, but it's still a really good sign.
And then, meanwhile, over in the Strip, the neighborhood itself just dropped a report. And so it has more than 3,200 residents now, which is 3 times the number in 2015. Even if you just look around there, you see so much expensive new housing that indicates there are a lot more residents and a lot more residents with money to burn, I would think.
What, at least spend, if not burn. Those houses are really expensive, all those beautiful brownstone style homes. And they also talked about new businesses. So 11 new businesses, studios, restaurants opened in the Strip in the past year. They say another 7 are expected this year. I don't know if that includes ones that have maybe already opened and ones that are still coming in the second half of the year. They listed some the new places, the new firms. I'm going to be honest, most of these don't mean anything to me.
Zowie cloud-based software is not on your radar, Megan?
Black Rhino Medical, Bizawi, yeah. Although Stack AV, they were already there. They were just Argo at the time. It's the same leadership, just a different name.
I've been really excited by the changes in the strip. I mean, I know that it was controversial to bring in some chains and things like that, but overall, it seems like that development has like ramped up the attention in the area.
The development at the terminal building, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think we should be worried at all about the character changing too much, like in the Strip District or downtown?
I mean, the Strip, I think, will always have its quirky little spots. I can't see them going away. I think it's kind of a sad but necessary change that we do need to add in some bigger, chain stores to keep the area thriving. People want to make it more of a one-stop shop when they go there. It's almost a necessary evil. I don't know. It is what it is. So I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying the market down there and the new restaurants. It is a different vibe, but it's not wholly bad, I guess.
I do appreciate that it does feel different, no doubt, like if you cross over Smallman Street, but at least the like architecture right there feels somewhat similar.
It does.
It's not a complete departure from the neighborhood because they remodeled an enormous old building. And I appreciate that because I feel like we have neighborhoods all over the city where like they just decided to build whatever they want. And it might be beautiful, but it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood.
I interviewed the developer of the Strip District Terminal a couple years ago for the Wall Street Journal. We ended up not doing the story, but he was just saying, he understands that people are upset that an older building, became more commercialized. But the fact is that building was in such disrepair that it was kind of a, do we revamp it or do we knock it down? And so I think those are the questions that there's not always a good answer to, but I think I would rather see it as it is now than knocked down.
Yeah, I remember going inside it in like 2013-ish when they had the farmers market in there, like 14, 15 before they disbanded that. And can confirm it definitely had like, we're using this because we can, but is it safe in here kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Before we move on, Meg, I'm curious, just because you mentioned the travel writing, we're getting all these new visitors. That's a good thing. But do you think that Pittsburgh should be making lists more often than maybe we are? Because there's listicles, there's articles, there's all kinds of things. And you've talked just a teeny bit in the past on the show just about like what cities have to do to court people like you to come.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of cities do host me and they host other travel writers to show off what they have going on. I think Pittsburgh is really starting to ramp that up. I met up with a friend at Kennywood a couple weeks ago that was here from Atlanta with Visit Pittsburgh. They were checking out the History Center, Kennywood. They went a couple other spots. And so I think we're really trying to showcase the city. I think it's a unique city to showcase because, like you said, people have these preconceived notions about this dirty old steel town. And that's not what we are anymore. So I think that things are moving in the right direction. I think getting the NFL draft is a big step for us.
For 2026.
And it's also a big chance to show up. Like that's kind of a sink or swim moment for us. So I'm hopeful for sure. I think that there's a lot of reasons for people to come here. We just need to figure out the best way to showcase them.
So we've talked about the state budget in Pennsylvania here on the show. If you are looking for an overview of what Pennsylvania decided to spend its money on, please check out our episode with Spotlight Pennsylvania reporter Stephen Caruso. We will put a link in our show notes. But since we are headed into back to school season, we wanted to talk a little bit about a bill that was passed as part of that final budget deal, but that could mean that there are more armed officers in schools starting this year.
Yeah, it had a complicated path to getting passed, but basically every district in the state is now required to have one security officer who's trained and licensed to carry a gun, though it's up to each district whether or not the guard actually brings the weapon into schools. So each district who has an officer would receive a $50,000 grant, and then if a district can't hire anyone or, doesn't have a police department that could provide one, they can get a waiver.
Meg, I'm curious. I think we all have kids on this call. I guess just as a parent of school-age children, because that makes you unique. How does this hit you? Do your kids have a school resource officer? And if you do, are they armed?
So our school does have a police officer that's at the school. I'm not sure how much he's there, like if he floats between schools or if he's just at one school. As far as I know, he is armed and works actually for our borough's police department. So not employed directly by the school.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about it. It does, as a mom, give me a sense of safety to know that he's there. But also, I do think about what message does it send our kids that their school needs an armed officer there. I think that is just kind of a sad reflection on the state of our country.
Yeah.
I did a lot of reporting after the Uvalde shooting about how to help talk to your kids about school shootings. And I just wish it's a conversation we didn't have to have. But since we do, I mean, I can see why this bill finally made its way through.
Yeah, and there were Democrats here in Allegheny County that even were supportive of it. Jim Brewster was a champion, for example. I'm wondering if either of y'all have recollections of school resource officers, like when you were kids. Like, growing up where I did, middle of nowhere, we had one. He was not a police officer. He was this older fella, LC. He had a gun, but he was part of my K-8 experience the entire time. And we always walked through metal detectors. And this was back in the 90s.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Seneca Valley, which is a pretty big local school. I'm sure we had one or probably multiple. I just don't really remember them. I think the big change I remember is after 9/11, which happened when I was a junior. Then we added the metal detectors and things, but we didn't have them before that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think my guy could have chased an elderly raccoon, let alone a quote unquote bad guy. He was wonderful and he was really nice and he knew everybody by name. But I don't think he would have, I don't know what he would have been in an emergency situation. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I don't remember having one, but I also remember I was in middle school when Columbine happened, and that kind of totally shifted the tone around school security.
Yeah.
And I remember from reporting on education, that was really when a lot of schools started installing metal detectors, bringing in armed security guards, really ramping up security. But, one of the things that concerns me is I think the idea is for these guards to help, I guess, protect a school if an intruder comes in. But anytime you introduce a weapon, there's also questions about whether this might get turned on the students. We see these videos that go viral of security officers being really rough with students, apprehending them sometimes in really violent ways, especially children of color. And so I just worry about what happens when people also have guns on them during this process.
Yeah. And my kids, I mean, they are school aged, but my oldest is only just starting middle school next week. And so I think it becomes a totally different conversation, too, when you do get into those, middle high school years where you have more of these confrontations, like you said, and it's not applied equitably. There's data that shows that. So far, my experience has mostly been in the elementary setting. So it's been a little more they do the DARE program and things, and it's been mostly positive. But I agree, there's a shift, as they get older for sure.
Yeah. And just for context, here, locally, we were just looking for examples of places that have been early adopters of some of these policies. Back in January, the Pittsburgh Catholic Diocese hired 6 armed guards and just a few security officers for its schools. They promised they were going to do more this year. But I think it's also important to remember who they hired not long ago to be their head of security. So it's Wendell Hisrick, who, if you've been in this town for very long, is the former public safety director for all of Pittsburgh. He left when Mayor Gainey took over, but he was an FBI guy. And he says all of these officers for Catholic schools will be former police with at least 20 years of experience.
Wow, that is quite a lot. Moving outside of the Catholic system, Pittsburgh Public Schools has metal detectors, but no armed officers. Also, PPS did have some extremely big news this week, which we are not skipping. Hang on until Monday. We'll have more on that.
Definitely.
But that's, the status of their security right now.
Yeah, they were the first in our region to get metal detectors. That was years and years ago. And I wondered when I was reading some of these stories about it, if maybe part of the reason that they've chosen not to have guns is also because they long ago invested in having their own quote unquote police force. So I'm just combining a few stories that we've read recently, but across the whole district, Pittsburgh Public currently employs about 70 security guards or aides, 11 school police officers. So I guess the training level is different there, and then 2 supervisors. They've been piloting this new program, too, that is paying for existing guards to get real police training. So the school safety chief told one news outlet that they would like to have 25 trained officers. That is what full staffing would be. But the pandemic has made it tough to stay fully staffed. That's true across the nation. Police force recruitment is teeny tiny, but they've been pretty vehement about keeping guns out of PPS. Yes, officers, no guns.
That's interesting. And I mean, as a mom, I kind of like that, but I get that is, we don't have all the data yet to make a decision on whether armed or unarmed is better. But just my peace of mind as a mom loves less guns in schools. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Meg, I'm kind of curious, like what maybe, you swim in so many spaces, like parenting, therapeutic spaces. I know you do a lot of work with Kidsburg, which is a wonderful outlet for parents here in the city. What do you hear from people about the kinds of resources that they want, or maybe even just kids? Like, what do they want to be seeing in their schools?
Yeah, I do talk to a lot of parents about this. And I think the one thing is, everyone does want their kids to be safe. We all have very mixed opinions on how that happens. But the bottom line is trying to remember that it's all based in kind of that, that parenting heart where you want the best for your kids. I think a couple things that are really important as we go back into the school year is to just think too about like basic safety stuff. The school buzzes you in and you hold the door for the person behind you, but you don't know them. Let it close in between, kind of that common sense stuff. I'm pretty public with my kids, but I try not to post pictures of them in shirts from their school. Just different things like that. And I think just ongoing conversations with our kids, like why we're practicing these things in a calm and even way that's not freaking them out, just a what if, the same way we practice for a fire at our house or a tornado drill. Even if we're more worried about it, trying to make it sound neutral to our kids, like all of those other things we prepare for.
I just wish it didn't have to be on the list of things we had to prepare for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's enough to keep you worried.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to finish up with something a little more fun. Meg, you have a real estate column in Pittsburgh Magazine, and you recently got to nab nose, at least virtually, in a very fancy and very special local spot. Tell us about a certain famous architect.
Yeah, so my editor, Jessica, came across, actually on Pittsburgh Reddit, a really interesting house in Shadyside. So it is a very old carriage house that was part of a larger estate on a neighboring street. And it was, in a bit of disrepair in the 50s. So now I'm going to say I might mess up this name. It is a Greek name. Tasso Katsalas is a famous local architect. So in the 50s, he got his hands on this house, and he was really known for working with concrete, mid-century modern style. He briefly was under the tutelage of Frank Lloyd Wright, who I love. I'm obsessed with Falling Water. And Tasso, he designed the Carnegie Science Center and parts of the Pittsburgh Airport. And
the one that fascinated me looking at some of his houses is that he also designed the Allegheny County Jail.
Yeah.
And one of the houses in particular that's here in Pittsburgh looks kind of like the jail. But like not strikingly so, but like I'm like, oh, I get it. I see the squares, the windows, like it kind of has a similar feel.
Yeah, and when he first started his career, I did a little bit of reading on this because I am an architecture nerd. He did kind of take the jobs he could get. He also built a lot of, housing developments, apartment buildings that all kind of have that similar vibe. And then his career really took off. He still lives in Shadyside. He's almost 100 years old. But this house, after he really gave it a revamp in the 50s, it was actually up for foreclosure. And a local couple bought it, rehabbed it, and put it back on the market. It's incredible.
It's beautiful. Did you actually get to go, or were you looking at pictures like the rest of us?
So I didn't get to go inside just because of timing. I did go look at the outside. You almost wouldn't know it's there. It's like in a fairy tale garden. It's set back off the street.
Well, that's like the whole thing with the mid-century modern and using like nature to like kind of like build it into the design, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And they were really, really concerned with that in the remodel. They wanted to bring in, they didn't want to just flip it and make it look modern. They wanted to honor all of that. So they used a lot of glass. There's a glass railing on the balcony that looks like you could just fall out, but you're safe. There's a railing.
Okay, that's a railing? Because I saw the photo and I was like, so you just fall out the bedroom window? Because I would absolutely do that.
No, there's a glass railing. So it doesn't obstruct the view, but you can see the pool. I mean, I feel like my kids would probably run through it and break it. But for, maybe an adult bedroom.
What's funny is, so my husband and I have this game where we play around on Zillow and try to pick, if we had unlimited money, which is the mansion of our dreams. And before I saw this story, Meg, I had sent him this listing. I was I found it. The deal is done because, my number one priority is giant windows with lots of natural light and views of trees. And this really has that. So I was really delighted to open your article and see it was my dream home that I will never be able to live in, but I'm glad it got documented.
Yeah, it can be yours for a casual $1.85 million.
And wait till you see the house I'm writing about on Monday, because it hits every one of those boxes at a little bit lower price point. Maybe we'll get you moving.
If you are interested in any of this, this architect, Katselas, he's got other houses here in Pittsburgh. We found a couple articles about them, so we will link them in the show notes. But Meg, your column covers all kinds of different houses. I'm curious if you have any, passing observations of the housing market right now, because you do write about some wildly expensive places, but then you also just published one about this like cute little 1,200 square foot row house in Lawrenceville that is somehow still under 300,000.
I know. Isn't it adorable? Yeah, I love writing about all kinds of houses. My mom is a retired realtor. She was with Caldwell Banker in Cranberry Township for most of my childhood. And every house is a story. That, I'm not a numbers person, but that's what I kind of inherited from her.
Aww.
I know. Oh, I know, right? I do. I think that the housing market is, it is getting pricier, but we still are the most affordable city in the country to buy a home, which is awesome, but does not mean that people here are not still feeling the crunch when they're house hunting. Because, the house I bought for $130,000 10 years ago, we couldn't afford today. And I get that that is happening in every neighborhood. I do think, though, there is still a mix of pretty affordable homes. We did cover that Lawrenceville home. Is listed by Emily Frazier, and it's adorable. It's 1,200 square feet. It's compact. It's got everything redone, move-in ready. They're out there. They are, but it is getting a little trickier.
I think one of the things that's tricky here is that there will be houses that kind of the price tag looks affordable, but then you go and realize they need substantial work. Yeah. And so that's, the price you would buy it for is not actually the price you would spend on it, because we just have really old housing stock in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
We have some of the oldest housing stock in the country. We are currently trying to rehab our big old Bellevue Beauty, 1904 home. And it seems like every day something decides to give up the ghost and stop working. I do think there's some good news coming for the market, though. We just heard this week that inflation is finally below 3%. That seems like probably that indicates the Fed might cut interest rates this fall, which will help the housing market. I really think it will. So.
Yeah, gosh, that would be nice. I guess before we go, what else will Jens be thinking about this weekend? I will start. I will be watching this whole Harris-Walz bus tour situation because it's kicking off in Pittsburgh. Our National Democratic Party seems to like launching things in Pittsburgh, especially since our local Democratic leaders seem to be having a little shakeup. In case you missed it, the mayor's communications director resigned over a petition going around asking the city to divest from any future investments into the nation of Israel. WBSA's Chris Potter has been doing great reporting on all of this, and I am sure either he or someone in his crew will be following all of that, plus the bus tour kickoff as well. So keep your eyes peeled if any of that interests you. And of course, we will be sure to share it in our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter.
Yeah. And speaking of Harris and Walz, if you listened to the show last week, we were all wondering when they would show up in Pittsburgh, since obviously they, kicked off their campaign together in Philly. And usually Western PA is the part of the state that gets a lot of Democratic love. So
yeah, Biden launched his whole presidential campaign here at the Teamsters Hall in Lawrenceville.
Exactly. We were saying they need to show up soon. And I don't think they were tuning into CityCast Pittsburgh, but they,
They did it. We made the list.
We did it. But yeah, so we mentioned this a little bit up top, but there's some big news about Pittsburgh Public Schools. A list of recommendations was shared this week, suggesting a bunch of closures and consolidations in the district. We're going to be delving into all of this next week, but it's something I'm definitely thinking about as a new parent whose neighborhood school could be affected.
Wow. That sounds stressful.
Yeah, this is just a proposal. We'll get more into this. We don't know where things will ultimately land. But, if I'm this anxious over it as a parent whose kid is still years away from school, I can't imagine what it's like to be grappling with all this if your kids are in schools right now.
Yeah. Meg, what about you? What are you going to be thinking about this weekend?
There's a lot going on this weekend. As an extrovert, I'm struggling to figure out just what to focus on. Bellevue, which is where we live, has the Rhythm and Brews Festival, which is really fun if you haven't been. And you don't need to get a ticket for the whole thing. You can just come down and check it out. We also are really hoping, if the weather holds, to go down and see the Flotsam River Circus. They're performing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on each of the rivers. And it's literally acrobats on a boat. So
Yeah, if you're a regular listener of the show, you heard Mallory get very excited about that in our guide to August.
I'll see you there, Meg.
I'm so excited. Like, I hope it doesn't rain. I looked at the radar and it looked very, very Pittsburghy this weekend with lots of rain. So that's kind of what we're excited about. And then school starts next week, and we've had a great summer. I know lots of parents have. I know my kids, though, they miss their friends. They're ready to go back. So I'm looking forward to it.
Lots of back to school photos in our feeds next week. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Our music is by Benji. Mallory Falk is our executive producer. Sophia Lowe and Elizabeth Kama produce the show. Francesca DeBecco writes our newsletter. And I am your host, Megan Harris. We'll be back on Monday with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend, everyone.
This is why I need to write coffee.